Hello, everyone. You're listening to Alternative Revelations with Linda Emanuel. Since this is my first podcast, I'd like to introduce myself by telling you my story. My story began in 1999 with a spiritual awakening. Shortly thereafter, I asked God for the full experience. Little did I know what I was about to get into. On February 1st of 2001, I had a psychic reading with an intuitive healer. He channeled to me this: in the year 2003, death will walk the earth, and you will tell people where to go to be safe. The psychic asked me, "Do you know what spirit meant?" And I did not know. 2 months later, I met a man, and in October, he broke my heart. This emotional trauma triggered chronic fatigue, lupus, MS, Crohn's, fibromyalgia, and severe depression. I also had huge granulomas under my armpits. These were very, very painful. Of course, I went to the doctor, but they did not know what was wrong with me. In fact, when I asked what was causing these granulomas, she said, "Change your deodorant." Another doctor said, "Ingrown hair." At the time when I was really, really sick, I could no longer work, and I trusted doctors, thinking that they knew everything. The first doctor I went to put me on steroids. I didn't know that steroids just mask the symptoms, but I was getting sicker and sicker, and when I learned about what steroids do to the body, I went off the steroids on my own. Immediately, the symptoms came out. My hands were like claws. I couldn't button a button. I couldn't step up a curb without help. I was on a walker and in a wheelchair. I was bedridden in the whole year of 2002 in the fetal position. The only good thing about getting sick was I was wasting away and got really skinny. At the time, my sister, who's a nurse, told my family that I was going to die. I actually looked like I had AIDS. In the meantime, I would ask God, "Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to die, remember? I asked for the full experience, but why am I sick?" My belief is that something bad will always turn into something good if you believe it will. Then, on February 28th of 2003, a friend found the answer on the internet. It was an article written by Donald W. Scott, the whistleblower of our bioweapon program in the United States. Being naive, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a joke. I called Donald W. Scott up in Canada, and I asked him, "Is this a joke? How come doctors don't know about this?" He was a very serious scholar, and he was not joking. This is when I thought of the prophecy, why I got sick. I believe sometimes you have to go through the experience to pick up the sword. But at that time, Donald W. Scott's organization did not know what could kill it. The organism is known as mycoplasma, and doctors do not know anything about it. I do have a curious mind, and I wanted to know why I was so chronically fatigued, why I was so depressed that I wanted to die. I was wanting to know why. It was in the year of 2002 that I switched doctors. The one doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy, but I knew by then that that was a death sentence, and she was getting a $2,000 kickback from Remicade. I went to a pain doctor. I had an MRI and a CAT scan. The MRI showed lesions and cysts in my brain. I had myelin sheath damage. Myelin sheath is the fat that insulates your nerves. It seems doctors do not know what causes the symptoms of all these diseases. such as the ones I had: the MS, the lupus, the Crohn's, the fibromyalgia, the severe depression. This doctor did not believe in drugs, or excessive drugs, I should say. He believed my problem was neurological. He was affiliated with Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, and he got me an appointment with the head neurologist at Barnes. At the same time, I had subscribed to Donald W. Scott's Common Cause Medical Research Foundation. I wanted to learn why I was so chronically fatigued, why I was so depressed that I wanted to die. There are researchers out there who do care, who want to help people, who are not on the payroll of the pharmaceuticals. I read these articles by these researchers and learned everything I could about mycoplasma. Now, getting back to this doctor at Barnes, I had to wait 3 months to see him, and my sister, being a nurse, insisted that she go with me. When we got to the hospital, I had to be in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk more than 10 feet without suffering from chronic fatigue. When we went into the appointment room, a Russian doctor came in to interview me first. He sat across the table from me, and I looked him in the eyes and I said to him, "This is caused by a microorganism." He looked at me as if I was crazy, and he threw his pencil down and sat back in his chair and just looked at me. Then when the head doctor came in, he didn't even acknowledge that I was there. He came over to the table, opened up a little suitcase, and got out a hammer, a small hammer, and started tapping on my joints. During his examination, he was telling the Russian doctor what to write down. At the end of this brief session, they sent me down to the blood lab, where they took 8 vials of blood from me. Within 2 weeks, they notified me that there was nothing wrong with me. They could not find anything. And to think I had lesions and cysts in my brain, I had nerve damage, I had severe depression, I had MS, I had Crohn's, I had a fistula, I had fibromyalgia. Of course, they diagnosed me with the easiest diagnosis, lupus. And I had to go back to the original doctor to get her to write my disability papers. At this time, I was totally disabled. I had dystonia. I couldn't raise my arms above my head. I couldn't step up a curb without help. I was wheelchair and walker bound. I was really, really sick. If it's too hard to believe all my medical problems were real, my medical records are on my website, www.lindaemanuel.com. You can look at them for yourself. Once my disability kicked in, I was able to get Medicare because up until then, I had no medical insurance. And that was my excuse to this one doctor who wanted to put me on methotrexate and steroids. I would tell her, "I don't have the money." It's actually funny to read her medical description of me. She called me crazy, then she wanted to put me on antidepressants. Once I did get my disability, I was able to change doctors, and the reason I changed doctors was there was a doctor in Chesterfield, and I can't tell his name. He prescribed his rheumatoid arthritis patients with tetracycline. I knew that tetracycline was the only known treatment for mycoplasma at the time. It could only inhibit it. It could not kill it. Your immune system had to do that. So I switched doctors, and right after that, there was a conference up in Canada regarding mycoplasma. All the researchers were going to be there. Dr. Harold Clark was the keynote speaker. I talked a friend into taking me up to Canada to attend the conference. It took place in Sudbury, Canada. At the same time, Donald came out with the article, AIDS, Made in America. For your information, AIDS is not a virus. AIDS is a GMO'd mycoplasma. It is not a true virus. You can read this article on my website. It's a history of the bioweapon program in America. Since I was one of the first ones who arrived at the conference, I was able to sign up for a free blood analysis. During the conference, the blood cell analysis was done on my blood, and you could actually see the mycoplasma being eaten by the macrophages. What was funny was one of the attendees came up to me afterwards and said, "Are you okay?" Meaning my blood was really entrenched with mycoplasma. I was really sick. I'm glad I attended the conference. I got to speak directly with Dr. Harold Clark, who researched mycoplasma his entire life. He was based out of Florida, and he also gave me several photographs of mycoplasma. I also got a list of alternative doctors at the conference, and Dr. Clark advised me to try to find a doctor who would give me a tetracycline IV. So when I got home, I got on the telephone and started calling around the country. All the doctors, of course, said no tetracycline IV. But there was a doctor in Alabama who answered his phone and said, "I've cured AIDS, I've cured chronic fatigue, and I have cured diabetes." Immediately, I knew whatever he had could get me well. I sent him my medical records, and that following Saturday, a friend drove me down to Birmingham, Alabama. I received an IV of mild silver protein. I have to mention that when mycoplasma dies in your body, or when you have a flu or a virus, your body will raise its temperature to try to kill the virus or the mycoplasma. And what happens is after the first IV, you have to stay in the doctor's office because you will go through what they call Herxheimer. Herxheimer is your body's reaction to the dead mycoplasma in your blood. What happens is mycoplasma's cell membrane is an endotoxin. And what I like to tell people is an endotoxin is to the immune system like a drop of blood is to a shark. About 2 hours after the IV was over, I started going through the Herxheimer. You might shiver, you might shake, you might have a fever, you might even throw up if you've had food in your stomach before the IV. After the Herxheimer was over, we went to the hotel, and I just went to bed. I was exhausted. Then the next morning, which was Sunday, I woke up and I felt so good. Oh my gosh. I could put my hand on top of my head. I also could get out of bed without assistance. It was amazing. I felt so good. Haven't felt good like that in 4 years. Sunday was a day of rest for my body to recuperate from the Herxheimer. Then Monday, we went back to the doctor's office, and I received a second IV of mild silver protein. This time, my friend who took me down there wanted to get going. St. Louis to Birmingham's a good 10-hour drive, and he wanted to get back before dark. And the IV was over about 11 o'clock. So we got in the car, and I went through the Herxheimer on the way back to St. Louis. He kept asking, am I okay, if I wanted to stop, and I said, no, keep going, I'll be okay. Coincidentally, that same week, I had a doctor appointment in Chesterfield with the new doctor. Amazingly, lupus came up negative. I built a website, and I started doing radio show. But I did not talk about the bioweapon because it was so negative. Now this was 2005, and people had no clue what was really going on in the world. I found that people just did not want to believe me. It was in the year 2008 that I became very discouraged. I got lured onto a show about MS, and they roasted me. After I was off the show, they were laughing about me, and it was at this time that I just wanted to quit. But then I started receiving emails on Facebook and texts and everything. Linda, don't quit. We believe in you. Don't quit. So I decided to keep my website, but I was going to go absolutely quiet. I wasn't going to do any more radio show. I wasn't going to step forward unless God called me. Now it's 2012. 2012 was an interesting year. I am a truther, and I read Jim Stone's website, who is also a truther. He exposed what really happened in Fukushima and also 9/11. Well, I emailed him telling him that people need to know about mycoplasma. Very quickly, he emailed me back and said this. He had the mycoplasma that causes Alzheimer's, and he killed it with the nicotine patch. Well, I was quite amazed at what he said, and he said, read the nicotine patch study on Alzheimer's and the nicotine patch. Now, half the patients wore a 16 milligram patch and the others wore a placebo. And at the end of 6 months, the ones who wore the patch, their memory and health improved. The ones who wore the placebo, they got worse. Now, these doctors, again, they don't know anything about the cause of Alzheimer's, but they thought it was an enzyme. But I knew better. I knew whatever's in this patch kills mycoplasma. So I thought to myself, I wonder if I should write a book. And then I said, no, I'm not going to spend all that time writing a book about what kills mycoplasma and how mycoplasma works. Before I do that, God's going to have to send me a sign. I like to go to this small church who at the end of it, their angel mystics give out messages. Now these angel mystics didn't even know me. And when I attended this church, an angel mystic walked up to me at the end of the service and said, I have a message for you. Will you receive it? Well, of course I said yes, and she said this, do your project, it will be successful. So there was my sign. So I started doing research, and the first thing I did was look up phytochemicals in plants, and I discovered that one of the things in nature that plants do to protect themselves from insects, fungus, and bacteria is nitrogen. Nitrogen kills bacteria, insects, and fungus. Tobacco has over 61 alkaloids in it, and you could read the article I wrote about the nicotine patch and how effective it is. It's called, Is It Safe for You to Stop Smoking? It took me 1 year to put together the first book of Alternative Revelations. Once the book was published, I started doing radio show again, and for some reason in 2013, people started believing me. It was amazing. I'm not going to try to get into how mycoplasma works. That's for the next episode in my podcast. But one of the things that mycoplasma attacks you is where you are genetically weak. And in my family, we are born with macular degeneration. In 2016, 11 million people in the United States had macular degeneration. Now, macular degeneration causes blindness, and I always suspected that mycoplasma was the root of it, but I had no way to prove it. Now I'm going to interrupt the story here and talk about divine intervention, that things happen in your life for a reason. We may not understand it at the time. It may take years to understand it, but this is what happened to me in 2015. It was planned. The whole year of 2015 through 2017 was a divine plan. And this plan started with a car crash that could have ended my life. And if it wasn't for the sudden pull of the steering wheel to the right, which I did not do, I would have been killed. Then in 2017, if it wasn't for a lost pair of glasses, which disappeared into thin air and we never could find them, if it wasn't for all of this, I never would have been able to discover the cure for macular degeneration. Now back to the story. Now let's fast forward to 2015. I had a car accident and I went to the eye doctor, and I have macular degeneration, and she said, you can no longer drive because your macular degeneration is too bad. So for 2 years I walked, took the bus, did whatever else you do if you don't drive. But then in 2017 I did a talk at a church and I lost my glasses. Now I believed that mycoplasma causes macular degeneration, and at that time I had mild silver protein. And I had heard a story down in Texas that a woman reversed her macular degeneration by putting flax oil in her eyes. Now, flax oil is antimicrobial. So at the time in 2017 in January, I said, what if I put flax oil in my eyes along with the silver? Because I had a doctor appointment in 3 weeks to get new glasses. So I did that for 3 weeks, 3 times a day, and went to the eye doctor. Now this is the truth. Went to the eye doctor, she looked in my eyes and she said, your macular degeneration is gone and your eyes have improved enough you can drive. So I still had a license and I had to get a car. So I got a car and I am now driving. It's a fact. Now I wrote an article about macular degeneration. It's on my website, www.lindaemanuel.com. So now let's fast forward to 2019. And recently I did John B. Wells' show, Caravan to Midnight. This is really interesting. And I don't think I know the pharmaceuticals know about me, but they've left me alone. But I was on his show, the second time I've been on his show, and I was scheduled for January 21st. And his producer had me send all the information through email, through Google. And I did that. And the morning of the show, the producer contacts me and says, all the information is gone. So I go on my Google account and my email was all wiped out. He said, we can't do the show. And I said, no, we have to do this show. People need to know. And actually the subject was how to protect yourself from the microwave, how to protect yourself. I said, people need to know this information. So we worked it out where he pulled all the information off my website, and I did go on the show. What's really interesting is 2 weeks later, my router got knocked out. It was dead. I did not mention this, but I learned how to communicate with Spirit in Sedona in 1999. And I asked Spirit if the same people who knocked out my email knocked out my router, and the answer was yes. Now, I interpreted this as a warning to be quiet, so I had to make a decision. I had to either move forward or stay quiet. But then I received some prophecy from Spirit that was just unbelievable. I didn't want to believe it, and I even got confirmations on it through media and etc. Now I really had to make a decision. Do I want to step forward, or do I want to lay back and watch the world go by? So I said to God, if you want me to go through with this, give me a sign. A couple weeks later, I'd say about 2 weeks ago actually, I took my mom to the hospital. She was having trouble breathing. She had congestive heart failure. Now I always take a couple pamphlets along and hand them out. And I handed them out to a couple nurses, and I was expecting a rejection. But oh my gosh, these nurses were different. They were into alternative and holistic medicine, and they were really excited about the articles. And they said to me, you need to be on podcasting. So there's my sign, and that's why I'm sitting here right now telling you my story and planning on coming out with mycoplasma, everything you need to know about cancer and disease, what protocols kill it. Actually, the most common cause of cancer and disease is mycoplasma. Once in a while there's a virus, but most of it is all bacteria. All through the ages, if you look back through the ages, people have died from infections. Cancer and disease are infections. Now, you may get run over by a bus, you may drop off a cliff, you may get hit by a car, you may get shot and bleed to death, but most of the time, people have died of infections throughout millennia. Now, if you're curious about the prophecy that was given to me, I will be doing a show in the future about ways to protect yourself if a plague is unleashed on us. This is what Spirit is telling me is going to happen. They have also revealed to me how the elite will protect themselves. So please listen to future podcasts. I will have a show on how to protect yourself from viruses and bacteria. Good night and God bless.